We thought it was just a myth until we saw something standing out there in the dark. At first, it didn't move, just watching us. Then, out of nowhere, it started rushing straight at us. Not running, not human. And when I turned around, it was already behind us.
We build bright, densely populated cities and assume we have effectively locked the unpredictable out. But that safety is entirely artificial. In North America alone, there are dense, sprawling forests stretching over 100-kilometer radiuses. The tree canopies are so thick that even at high noon, sunlight barely manages to touch the forest floor. The people who know these environments best are the remote park rangers and search and rescue officers. Some spend decades working alone in desolate guard cabins, and they regularly report things that shouldn't exist. One isolated ranger walked outside his cabin to find a pair of glowing eyes hovering 4 feet off the ground. When he threw a piece of heavy firewood at it, the creature didn't scatter. It crouched lower, creeping forward with slow, deliberate steps that broke all known behavioral patterns of local wildlife. Out past the tree line, the rules we rely on simply vanish. Wander too far from the streetlights, and you immediately re-enter the food chain as prey. Former police officer David Politis has spent years tracking a silent epidemic known as the missing 411 phenomenon. It documents people vanishing inside national parks, often slipping out of sight in a matter of seconds. When someone disappears, the state launches massive operations. Highly trained trackers and specialized sniffer dogs scour the area. Yet time and again, they fail to find a single trace. In one case, a young boy vanished into thin air while walking just feet ahead of his family. 40 days later, a local volunteer finally located his body. This map tracks the trajectory of his disappearance. He was found 40 to 50 kilometers away from where he vanished, wedged into a hole on a slanted, sheer cliff, so dangerous that even professional hikers struggle to climb it. This data visualization shows the glaring contradictions from his autopsy. The boy died of hypothermia, freezing to death, even though the local weather was warm. And though his shoes were gone, his bare feet were perfectly clean, without a single speck of dirt. He didn't walk there. When the deep wilderness holds threats that can bypass search parties and defy gravity, the logical response is to retreat, to lock your doors. But hiding inside your house assumes the threat is only out there. What happens when the danger isn't lurking in the woods? Sometimes the threat is something your own ancestors deliberately invited across the threshold. In the remote terraced villages of the Bahari Mountains, a grandfather passed away, leaving his family a house with a strict rule: never open the locked room on the top floor. His modern, city-dwelling grandson assumed it was just old superstition. He broke the padlock. Inside the bare room, he found a wax-sealed clay pot wrapped in a red cloth, surrounded by a thick, dried ring of blood. He had uncovered a gulin, or ban. It is a bound entity created through a dark ritual where a practitioner mixes graveyard ash with their own blood and sweat. Once bound, it ensures the family's financial success. The entities out in the woods are wild and feral, but a bound entity operates like a contract. It follows strict transactional rules, and if you break them, it exacts a violent penalty. To maintain the contract and keep the entity docile, the master must feed it a regular offering of animal blood and rotting food every single new moon. By touching the pot, the grandson had unwittingly claimed ownership, but he offered it nothing. That very night, the family's buffalo began screaming in agony. Driven by an invisible force, the animal repeatedly bashed its own head against the barn wall until it died. The violence then turned on the grandson himself. He woke up paralyzed, struggling to breathe. Sitting squarely on his chest was a creature with a massive head, tiny teeth, and skin that looked half torn off. It told him it was hungry, leaving literal burn marks in the shape of small hands on his skin. Because the original master was gone and the offerings had stopped, the starving entity shifted its focus directly onto the surviving bloodline. Thick brick walls and modern skepticism offer zero protection when your own grandfather legally bound a predatory spirit to the deed of your home. If inheriting a grandfather's curse is terrifying, the final escalation brings the danger closer to home. The ultimate violation is discovering that a supernatural threat was weaponized by the parent meant to protect you. A young woman named Small suddenly began experiencing violent physical contortions. Her limbs would twist into unnatural angles, her eyes would roll back to pure white, and she would scream in a heavy, grating voice that did not belong to her. She was rushed through a maze of sterile emergency rooms and subjected to blood tests and CT scans. Despite her agonizing pain, doctors delivered a baffling verdict. Her reports were entirely normal. Modern science could find zero physical causes for her suffering. As a child, Small had innocently exposed her mother's secret affair, an act that shattered the household. In the years that followed, her mother retaliated by weaponizing black magic, using it to systematically dismantle her daughter's physical and mental health. Being targeted by her own parent, while the medical world looked at her clean test results, left Small completely vulnerable. She lived in a reality where neither her family nor society could be trusted to protect her. The attacks escalated inside her fiancé's home. In the dead of night, she would crawl out of bed, hover over sleeping family members, and whisper rapidly in foreign tongues. Conventional help had failed, forcing the family to look elsewhere. They brought in an Islamic scholar experienced in the unseen. He initiated the ruqya, a spiritual exorcism, directly confronting the entity that her mother had bound to her. The family eventually discovered the material evidence of the curse buried deep in the dirt of their own yard. Following the scholar's instructions, they unearthed rotting bundles of hair and needles, proof of the ritual hidden within the foundations of their home. We build fences and lock our doors to keep the feral things in the deep woods away from us. But whether it is an old jar left in an attic by a grandfather or a curse buried in the yard by a mother, these stories prove a chilling point. The most terrifying threats don't have to break in. We carry them inside ourselves.